Biden has announced $1.2 billion of student debt relief for nearly 153,000 student loan borrowers and plans to email each person so they know who to thank for it. According to The Hill, this comes through the saving of a valuable Education Save repayment plan. This portion of loan forgiveness through the SAVE plan was initially planned for July, but the Education Department identified eligible borrowers sooner. Previously, the White House shared it will try to give student debt forgiveness to those experiencing, quote, hardship.
The White House is proposing that hardship is determined by factors such as, quote, a borrower's total student loan balance and required payments relative to household income, and whether a borrower has high cost burdens for essential expenses like healthcare or childcare, The Hill reports. So I think Biden pushing student loan forgiveness to this extent to really tailor and means test the program is a disservice to the people of the United States of America. When we think of the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP loans, there was forgiveness for those loans because it was deemed to be the right thing to do, that the country was in a time of economic hardship. To avoid a recession, there was a lot of economic stimulus programs, and this would help a lot of the businesses, many small businesses across the United States of America, continue operating through this period of economic hardship during the COVID pandemic. Now, those loans were forgiven. In the case of student loan debts, it is true that we were in a time of recession. The 2008 financial crisis is when we saw tuition skyrocket and we saw student loan debt increase by 100%. And this was largely because people were sheltering. They didn't want to enter the job market because the job market was a bad one to enter. They were told going to college would help them, do better in life, get better jobs later on. It used to be the case in the 70s that you could afford college tuition while working a minimum wage job. And so this huge change was really unjust. It's something that made for-profit colleges really rich and people servicing these loans really rich at the expense of people just trying to do the best they can, everyday working people in the United States. And so it's the right thing to do economically to free up this capital so people can live a normal life in the US. They can afford a car, a house to start a family, because right now student loan debts are getting in the way of that. And that's not something that just applies specifically to people experiencing hardship, but really everyone that's incurred a lot of student loan debt.
I would say that there's a fundamental difference between the PPP loans and student debt, and primarily it's that the program for PPP loans was written so that they would be forgiven only if they were used for small businesses to continue to pay workers' salaries during the pandemic. So it was really working people who were supposed to benefit the most from that program. Of course, there was a lot of PPP fraud. A lot of people did not continue to pay their workers. Those funds should absolutely be recouped, and the businesses who took advantage of it should absolutely be punished. But it was a condition of those loans that if they were used to continue to pay workers' salaries or hourly wages, that they would be forgiven. When you take out a student debt, the loan is written such that you have to repay it. So I think there's a fundamental difference there. I am sympathetic to the idea that there are a lot of 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds who believe that because they go to college, they're going to be able to pay back this debt. And they're sort of convinced by some predatory loan companies that they are going to get a massive return on their investment, and convinced by the colleges, by the way. But I don't think that that's a justification for the type of redistributive program that we're talking about with student loan forgiveness. One of the fundamental problems that I have with student loan forgiveness, whether it's means tested or not, in this case, the means testing is just that you have a lot of debt. It doesn't really have anything to do with your income or your earning potential, is that it's a transfer, a wealth transfer from the majority of Americans who didn't go to college to the minority who did. And so you're actually ending up taking money away from individuals who are part of the working class, people who merely have a high school degree, to people who have a higher earning potential because they made the decision to go to college. And that is just fundamentally unfair. It seems perverse to me to take from the working class to give to the upper middle to upper classes, who are primarily the people who hold student debt. The majority of student debt is also held by people who went on to get masters and PhDs. So do we really think that a plumber, for example, should be on the hook for the debt that was taken on by a doctor or someone who has decided to go into academia? I just find that to be very fundamentally unfair. The second issue I have with student loan forgiveness is that it only incentivizes those tuition hikes that you were talking about. When colleges know that students are going to continue to take out massive loads of debt because they are operating under the assumption that they're never going to have to pay it off, they're only further incentivized to continue to make the cost of college prohibitively expensive, and people will take out those loans. So I think the proper solution here is not to do this massive wealth transfer, but to, one, seize the endowments of the universities and make them pay off the student debt. They're the ones who are supposed to provide a return on investment when students go there. They're the ones who are supposed to make sure that when students graduate, they have a high earning potential and that they're able to pay off whatever debt they may have taken out. So I think universities should absolutely be on the hook for this, not the American taxpayer. And second, I think this money would be better spent investing in changing the way our economy works, such that young people don't feel like they have to go to college in order to have a sound economic future. We should be investing in job training programs. We should be investing in incentivizing businesses to hire non-college graduates and making that a viable career option the way that it was 30, 40 years ago, instead of making it the presumption that everyone has to go to college in order for them to be a valuable person in the marketplace.
Yeah, let's start with the PPP loans. So there's two reasons someone could have their PPP loan forgiven. One is that they prove that they did spend it on payroll, but there's also a non-payroll forgiveness program, and that applies to any businesses who spent the money on mortgage interest payments, on any businesses who spent it on rent or lease payments, so covering the lease for businesses, and also business utility payments. So I agree that only the loans forgiven should be loans that went to payroll to pay the salaries of worker as the policy intended, but it turns out that's really not how this program is shaking out. And so when we look at student loans altogether and the student loan debt crisis, it really is a huge problem that so many universities that were for-profit universities emerged during the financial crisis when we saw college attendance go up. It's a huge problem that they didn't increase the value of education while increasing the cost of attending college. And this is one of those kinds of schemes that really falls under the description of price gouging. When you have a financial crisis in the United States of America and a subsequent big recession, you have all of these people that need to make ends meet. They need to work to make a living in order to put food on the table, pay their rent. And so it's a really tough decision to live in a market, to live in an economy that should be regulated by Congress to a degree that protects people from this kind of exploitation. Corporations and, for-profit institutions included and public institutions included should not be able to extremely raise the price of tuition just because they're seeing more kids want to go to school. There should be some sort of regulation of the economy so that they're getting more in return if they're paying more. And that really wasn't the case. So in order to return our economy back to something more regular, it doesn't have to be one thing without the other, right? Student loan debt forgiveness for everyone who's in debt currently, and that means the working class is left out. People who have paid off their loans should definitely receive some kind of tax rebate in the amount that they paid back on student loans, interest included, $2 trillion of student loan debt in the United States, and we don't know how much of that is accrued interest. That's another huge part of this, is that, school prices were tuition was raised so much because people were making money off of the interest payments and the consolidation and student loan servicing fees. So it became kind of a money-making scheme, and to exploit everyday people in America, working people. I was a working class person who went on to go to college. I think it's wrong. And for that to be corrected involves dealing with the debt crisis that we have, but also finding policies going forward that regulate how people can get the education they need to contribute to the economy. If the United States had no one going to university at all, our economy would collapse. People need that kind of training to be doctors, to be lawyers, to be engineers, to do things that our economy depends upon at the most basic level. And so we really need those things to be affordable as they were back in the 70s.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll be back with more Rising after this.